Thanks, Britta. Appreciate it. 23 minutes now before the top of the hour. Military season 2. More Venezuelan-linked oil tanker zone appeared to be sailing under a Russian flag evaded a 2 weeks. Vice President J.D. Vance says this is how we control Venezuela. It was a fake Russian oil tanker. They pretended to be a Russian oil tanker in an effort to avoid sanctions regime. People have asked, how do you control Venezuela? We are seeing it play out in the real time. The way we control Venezuela, we control the purse strings and energy resources and tell their guy you are allowed to sell oil, so as long as you serve America's national interest. You are not allowed to sell it if you can't serve America's interest. That's how we exert incredible pressure on that country without wasting a single American life and without endangering a single American citizen. Russians did not want US to take that ship. They told US NATO and stop following it. We took it anyway. Dan Hoffman, a former CIA station chief and knows Moscow inside out. I love that we said we're taking it anyway and took it. What message does that send to Russians about their role in Venezuela? Yes, so we drew a red line there on the blockade off Venezuelan oil. And the Trump administration enforced it. That tanker was the BELLA. It was reflagged on December 24. It shipped prior, since 2021, shipped roughly 5 million barrels of China 20 no Iran. They are supplying our adversaries with oil. The message to Russia was clear. This is our hemisphere and we're going to enforce our rules-off engagement. Look, there was no negotiation over this. We made it clear. We took action. And the Russians have now lost their ally in Syria. They couldn't do anything about us bombing Iran's nuclear sites. And now they are losing thoroughly in Venezuela. The other message is to the Venezuelan incidents room government that they cannot rely on Russia and China and Iran to prop them up as they have before. Brian, I want to get back to Venezuela to finish the Russiating. Lindsey Graham said yesterday President Trump will sign bipartisan sanction legislation that would sanction any country buying Russian oil. That's Brazil, that is China. And that's Turkey. Your thoughts? If that, in fact, happens, that's huge. It's a significant step forward. Look, Ukraine has been open to peace negotiations from the very beginning. All they are doing is defending their territory integrity. Their independence. It's Russia that launched this war. It's Russia that could stop it. President Trump has tried everything he could to bring Russia to the negotiating table. He has offered all sorts of incentives. And now I think clearly, after the sanctioning of, President Trump is following up with more punitive sanctions and rightly. So, Brian, back to Venezuela, J.D. Trump expand on the big picture. And also the president gave a 2-hour interview to the New York Times. Here's an excerpt. Only time will tell how long they are going to be there. We will rebuild it in a very profitable way, meaning Venezuela. We are going to be using oil and we are going to be taking thyroid. We are going to get oil price down. And we're going to be giving money to Venezuela, which they desperately need. Right now they are barely putting out 300,000 barrels a day. They should be over 1 million to 2 million. We could make them profitable. And stop with the discount oil to all their evil allies. Right. Look, that's the first step is to break Venezuela's relationships with Iran and China and Russia. Eliminate that malignant influence from our hemisphere. Secondly is to influence the future of the Venezuelan government. And so, what I think Secretary Rubio has learned, look, I remember briefing him when he was in the Senate Intelligence Committee. We learned a lot of lessons from Iraq. We dissolved Ba'ath Party and Sunni insurgency. That's not the direction we want to go in Venezuela. We are delivered this much more measured approach. No boots on the ground, leveraging the oil to impact some change in Venezuela. Brian, looking like Marco Rubio is going to meet with Denmark official on some high level and say, look, we're going to buy Greenland from you. You have had since the 1700s. It's not practical for you to better now. We want to do this the right way with an ally. The last thing we bought was Alaska. We had 3 separate times administrations in our past. We tried to get Greenland in some way. Your thoughts about the need for this and the reason we need it? Locke, it is obviously in a critical place in the world, overlooking the Arctic and Russian China there. The question is, how do we defend our own national security interests there and whether we want to take over Greenland or not. 57,000 people there and they get a right to decide, do they want to be part of Denmark or part of the United States? In the polls indicate they don't want to be part of the United States. And so what we want to do, however we proceed, is avoid any collateral damage to this important ally relationship with NATO partner that mobilized after 9/11 and sent troops to Afghanistan on our behalf. I think that's going to be critical going forward, ensuring that we have good, productive ally relationships. Toilet with those threats, and Denmark is one of them. Rare earth, they might have the oil that we need. The base expander base, maybe there is a this fraud as it was occurring. He absolutely knew that it was occurring. Why would Governor Walz let $9 billion in fraud occur, Mr. Hudson? In my opinion, because it was politically beneficial to Democrats. The Soviet community is a huge constituency group. Can Governor Walz be defended, to allow this to fester for his entire tenure as governor? Mr. Chairman. If Walz wasseries about stopping fraud he would have done it in 2019 when he took office. He's done nothing other than appoint commissioners that suppressed fraud and retaliated against their own employees, but not a single Democrat requested a waive on the committee from the state of Minnesota. There is one member of the Minnesota delegation, Representative Omar, who coincidentally is of Somali descent, did not come to the hearing. I invite her to come to the next hearing. Sean. You said this is the tip of the iceberg. We learned there is a political motive and incentive behind it, and Walz was warned repeatedly. Do you have any doubt? All of that is true? No, it's 100% true. Look, these state legislators are well respected. They took an oath. They went under oath. If they lie then they commit perjury. No one is accusing them of lying in Minnesota. They said also whistleblowers have been coming forward for years. Not weeks, not months, but years. Trying to warn Tim Walz and the Attorney General Keith L. Son that this fraud was happening, and Walz would then in turn retaliate against the whistleblowers who were all state employees. There are checks and balance all along the way, where government agencies and independent auditors and inspectors general are supposed to catch this fraud. Apparently, they were catching fraud in Minnesota, but every time they would report it, Tim Walz would bite their head off and threaten their jobs, threaten their tenure, and it will just go away until this video went viral. And here where, Sean, what do you believe the consequences will be? People always say, well, we never get to that part. Number 1, and number 2, how widespread in terms of other states do you believe this is happening in? First of all, I'm confident that we're going to see some real accountability here. The Department of Justice is already on the ground. They have already arrested several dozen people in connection with Somali fraud. I think that number is going to increase significantly. Probably tenfold at least. And I think that what you saw today showed that Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison both have liabilities in this because they knew about the fraud. Yet, not only did they turn a blind eye, they retaliated against any brave employees in the state of Minnesota who would come forward and tell them what was going on. So they didn't want to do it, and the reason they didn't do it was because it was political. That's why the Democrats left the border open. They lost the confidence of the working men and women. They have lost the confidences of Americans with common sense. All they had left were the illegal immigrants coming into the country, and they would sign them up immediately for welfare. That's what we've seen in the Somali population. Since we launched this investigation, we've had other whistleblowers come forward, and it looks like this is a pattern with many Somali groups, with several groups in America, and we are going. Gentlemen, continues, third hour, right now, Griff, a Fox News alert, Acity on edge, huge crowds gathering in Minneapolis overnight after an ICINVOLVEDSHOOTING. People are tense after a woman is shot and killed by an IC agent. A Barning. The video we're about to show you is graphic. No, Brian. You can see ICE officers approaching an SUV that was blocking the road. The woman behind the wheel backs up and Ash drives. OFF shots were fired and the woman is dead. Ainsley, Alexis McAD. I hope so is live in Minneapolis with the latest. Reporter. Good morning AS. We'll see the pictures and videos not just on our screen, but people here locally watching Thessal phone videos. People have questions, and some people have already made up their mind, taking to the streets saying ICE murdered this woman, but DHS says the agent was acting in self-defense. They say he was hit by that woman trying to interrupt an ongoing ICE operation. Let's look at that video again, and it is a little graphic. Watch. NOOHMY bleep God. What the bleep? What the bleep? You just bleep. What the bleep did you do? Reporter. Those people just happened to be right there filming, because this woman wastering to blocked the streets according to agents. The DHS says the woman used her SUV. She tried to put it there on that snowy road to stop them from going around. That they walked up to her, told her to get out of the car. But when they reached to open her door off that SUV, she kind of backed up. Then she says, or they say, Shep at night drive and stepped on the gas speeding toward the agents, hitting one. That agent opened fire. So a lot of videos. I want to show you a different tone I've been looking closely at. You can see this different angle. You can see the SUV appeared to strike the officer who fired the deadly shots. He was hospitalized but released. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem says the woman used her vehicle as a 7 on. ICE officers and agents approached the woman with the vehicle in question, who was blocking questions, and she had been talking and impeding their work all throughout. The Dakotas agents repeatedly ordered her to get out of the car and to stop obstructing law enforcement, but she refused to obey their commands. She then proceeded to weaponize her vehicle, and she attempted torn a law enforcement officer over. Reporter. So the woman who was killed has now been identified as Renee Nicolemaclin Good, 37 years old, recently moved to Minnesota and out there for what some people called being illegal. Observer trying to see what ice was. Investigators say she wasn't just here at this. Sinesh had been walking around and following her around at the cardo stop operations. Some officials say this woman was murdered by ICE. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jay Fry, says they should get out of here. They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Gone seen the video myself. I want to tell everybody directly. That is bleep. And I have a message for ICE.to ICE. Get the bleep out of Minneapolis. Reporter, OK.SOAS. The shooting remains under investigation. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who's at the center of a massive fraud investigation, is telling people not to believe what he calls Fed's propaganda machine. He says it's time for the Feds to pack up. We do not need any further help from the federal government. To Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, you've done enough. Minnesota will not allow our community to be used as a prop in the national political fight. We will not take the bait. Reporter, and Walz kept warning you guys yesterday, saying, don't react, don't overreact, peaceful protest. But when you look at the video clips, they were trying to break into the federal building in one of the clips and also throwing ice and snow at those agents. Let's take a look. Reporter, and whether the people here in Minneapolis support ICE or not and they have questions, that's fair. They want to ask those questionsthay can ask the questions assaulting the ICE agents. DHSSAYS. It's happening and happening more often. We have to keep a close eye on it. BAUS of the protests. The Minneapolis School District is closing for the rest of the week. They're saying we're going to doid as precaution because they saw what happened in 2020 where it was chaos and hoping THATSNOT going to happen again. We'll be here on the GROUNDTHOUGH. Brian. Democrats are great at closing schools. Thanks a lot Alexis. They're very comfortable doing that so the kids pay the price. I'm amazed, too, we can get into nuances and slow all the video down and start looking at where everyone is standing. Bottom line is they were clearly telling her to stop. Do anybody in your life that, when told to pull over by a cop, would continue to drive, and then plow straight ahead into that cop? That fundamentally is extremely dangerous behavior. Griff, Alexis mentioned something in her hither, that this woman claimed to be a legal observer having offered dozens of protests and riots. A legal observer does not put himself in the middle of law enforcement action blocking and trying to impede ICE blocking the car. Doesn't obviously speed away, putting potentially ICE officers' lives in danger. But I think it's very rich that Mayor Jacob Fry there is judging an investigation that is now started into what exactly happened by calling it murder, by saying that it was self-defense and dropping F-bombs instead of facts. Watch, I'm so sorry if I offended their Disney princess ears. But here's the thing. If we're talking about what's inflammatory, on the one hand you've got someone who dropped an F-bomb and on the other hand you have somebody who killed somebody else. F-bomb, killing somebody. I think the more inflammatory action is killing somebody. And so, once again, let's be real and just honest and straight up about what's happening here. This is not okay, the way they are coming into cities, not just Minneapolis but around the country. Is not okay, Brian. Yes, it is. You have illegal immigrant criminals in your city, you want to arrest them. Someone's got to. Griff, a sanctuary city. Ainsley, good point. Griff, ICE would not have to make at-large arrests if the local authorities cooperated with handing over violent illegal criminal aliens over to the feds. So it's not only appropriate, it's necessary. Ainsley, and these officers are just doing the job that they were told to do by the people above them. And you're right, Brian, when a police officer is telling you, get out of your car, you're supposed to listen. And she continues to drive. And if you look at different angles of that video, she did hit the police officer and he fired shots. And then Paul Muro, who you interviewed earlier, said that if you look at where he fired the shots, it went through the windshield. Sosh was directly coming at him. It wasn't that he fired shots through the side of the car, Paul said. He said the car actually hit the officer and he had a few seconds to actually think how to handle this, and he fired shots because, as Kristi Noem was saying, that she was using her vehicle as a weapon. She weaponized her vehicle. Kristi Noem also said the same officer had previously been dragged by a car back in June, dragged by an anti-ICE rioter in June. The driver rammed him with a Karen, dragged him, and he sustained injuries at the time. So when you have that split-second decision to decide how do I handle this, you see another car coming towards you, he fire shots because he feared for his life. That she was